Peter Schutz is here, and she is the Region 4 motor stock sort of manager for this region of the United States, sort of like the Midwestern area and all the way up in the northern part of the state. And she's a historian and also an author, and she's brought with her fantastic book that her father wrote about Porsche and his time with Porsche. And it's a really fascinating story, and she'll be telling you a little bit about that today. So we're honored to have her with us. And she's like author, historian, and all-around super Porsche girl. So she's with us today. So please help me welcome Lori.
Thank you, Fred. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here today, representing not only the Porsche Club of America, but car lovers everywhere. And Fred, I gotta say, I give this presentation several times a year. I talk in front of other business groups. But that introduction that you just gave me, I gotta say, by far, is the most recent. That was not my own. That was borrowed from my father. That's often the way he opened his conversations and his talks when he would talk about Porsche and other wonderful things. So my father was Peter Schutz, and he was the president and CEO of Porsche AG, that's the mothership over in Stuttgart, from 1981 to 1987. It was a really magical time, and a lot of really fun things happened with Porsche, and a lot of really incredible cars came out during that time. And so with the nice invitation that I've had today, I'd like to share some of those stories with you. You ready? Yeah. All right. So some of you have known me since I've been part of the Porsche Club of America community since about 1983. And so you met my father, and you've heard some of these stories. Remember when you met my dad? I know some of you have, right? All right. That was the first time I met him. So I was born in Peoria, Illinois. My father was always a diesel engine guy. He has a mechanical engineering degree from Illinois Institute of Technology and went to work for Caterpillar Tractor Company in Peoria. And the first 2.5 years of my life, fantastic, absolutely wonderful. And then my twin brothers came along. And then things got really crazy and awesome. So Dad was very involved with us as a father. When I was 10 years old, we then moved to Columbus, Indiana, where he rose to be the vice president of international sales and marketing. And Cummins was also a diesel engine company, or for truck engines rather than your Caterpillar being earth movers and crazy things like that. So life was always full of something with a motor or something moving. So you can see there I am, a little ham, even when I was little. We had a little sailboat that he named the Lorianne after me. Those of you that are going to read the book, or have read the book, there's a story about a little girl on a bicycle. That's me, right here. And the twin brothers, Mitchell and Michael. And we're best of friends today. The funny story about when Mitchell and Michael were born, my mother was due on May 2nd. And back then, they didn't do ultrasound. They didn't know she was having twins. So on April 1st, as they're going up the elevator to the delivery room, the doctor says, "You know that heartbeat echo I heard? I'm not so sure about that." So my mother had identical twin boys on April 1st. And my father, who was always a jokester, tried to call all the relatives and say, "Hey, we've got twin boys." "Fine, call us in a month when she has the baby." That's fine. And they would hang up on him. So it took quite a while to get the word out about my twin brothers. But life goes on, and graduated high school, and who knows what that car is? Some of you do. That is a 1980 911 SC Weissach Coupe. So this was supposed to be the last 911 model. They did a signature series of 200 in the black and 200 in the color of the wheels, so platinum beige metallic, because Porsche had made the decision then to discontinue the 911. And some of you might know the rest of the story, but here we go. So in October of 1980, I get a phone call from my dad. And he'd been living in Germany, working for yet another diesel engine company called Kluckner Humboldt Deutz. And he called me and he said, "Hey, Lori, your dad's going to start a new job on January 1st. I said, "Great, Dad, what are you going to do?" He said, "Well, I'm going to go be the president and CEO of Porsche. It's a German company. They make these little sports cars. Maybe you've heard of them." And I said, well, yeah, Dad, I've heard of them. I grew up in southern Indiana, went to the Indy 500 every time I could. I knew all about cars. But I said, Dad, what do you know about sports cars? You're a diesel engine guy. He said, yeah, I know. That's what I told Professor Porsche during the interview. I don't know the first thing about designing these cars, building these cars, selling these cars. Professor Porsche, you're a great guy and this is a great company, but I don't know if I can help you. And Professor Porsche said, Mr. Schutz, you don't understand. I have people that do all of that. I need someone to come in and lead this company and get the passion back into my people so we can do really wonderful things for the automobile industry. And Dad said, well, I think I can do that. So sure enough, he got the nod, he got the job. And after that phone call, I turned and looked at a friend of mine and I said, okay, within 5 years, I'm going to give him 5 years, Porsche will have a new convertible and an airplane. I was wrong. It took him 3.5. So let's talk about that story. So the fact that you can still today buy a rear-engine opposed piston Porsche 911 today was due to my father. This was what was published in Road and Track after he passed away about 2.5 years ago. So that story goes that after he went over to Stuttgart to take his job at Porsche, every morning he would sit and meet with Professor Porsche. Now, Professor Porsche office, when he got there, was on the other side of the Zuffenhausen campus, where the Porsche factory was. Dad had a very large office. The first thing he did was have it remodeled and made into 2 offices, and he gave the bigger side to the professor, so they could meet every morning. And they could go in and talk, and Dad would listen. And he would walk around the factory, and walk around and talk to everybody else there who would listen. And about 6 weeks into the job, he walked into the office of a wonderful, fine gentleman by the name of Helmut Bott. And Helmut Bott was the head of research and development. And in that office, there was a timeline. Now, many of you have been in business where you have a product timeline chart on the wall. We're making these products, here's how long they're going to be along, here's where we're going to introduce new stuff. So at the top of the chart is the 911, and the line stopped at 1980. Then there was the 924, and that kind of went till about 84. And then the 944 line started about 83, and that kept going. And there was a big fat line along the bottom for the 928. That was going to be the future of Porsche. Well, they didn't quite have it all wrong, because what kind of cars do we have today? Front engine, water cooled, rear drive, right? So Dad went over to the desk, and he picked up one of those black magic markers, and back then there were those real stinky things, and he went over to the chart on the wall, and he went to the 911 line that stopped at 1980, and he started to draw a line across the poster, onto the wall, around the corner, across the window, down the other wall, and out the door. And he came back in, and he said, have I made myself clear? The 911 will continue forever. So that's how we say the 911. Pretty cool, huh? How many of you have a new 911? So Dad was a rather unconventional, unorthodox president of Porsche, as you can imagine. Here comes this American Yankee diesel engine guy, and he's supposed to lead everybody to greatness. But he kind of made a mark for himself after the first 6 weeks, and he brought back the 911, and there was a lot of excitement. Like, nobody argued with that decision. We're going to keep making the 911 forever. Okay, great. And one of the quotes was, when he was asked about, well, how did you make this decision to turn around and save the 911? And his comment was, we're not sure who discovered water, but we're pretty sure it wasn't a fish. It was so obvious we had to keep the 911. And I will be bold enough to say that had he not saved the 911, which probably also saved Porsche, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation today, right? So what else happened when he was there? The airplane. So the airplane engine happened in about 1985. I remember being at the opening banquet at the Porsche Parade at Road America, and Dad made the announcement that we're going to teach the 911 engine to fly. So they first put the 911 engine in a Cessna. Now you have to understand, my dad was a pilot, a single-engine pilot, a plane pilot, and he had a flight school with 3 of his buddies when I was growing up in grade school. And so I knew that airplanes were his passion, and that's why I said, Give him 5 years. This happened in 3.5. So then Porsche teamed up with a company called Mooney. Now, how many of you are familiar with small airplanes? So Mooney is to the small single-engine aircraft the way Porsche is to automobiles. It's the best, it's the sportiest, you bring one out on the runway and everybody flocks to see it. So they teamed up and they had quite a successful run with this cute little airplane. It didn't last very long. The risk and liability of having an airplane was a little bit more than the folks in Germany could handle, but it did last for a little while. And there's that 911 convertible that I talked about. So that happened, but debuted at the Frankfurt Auto Show in '83. So it didn't take him long to get those two things done. But what else happened when he was there? Here's a couple pictures I'd like to share with you. These are from my personal archives. And by the way, anything I might say today that is different than you've heard before, please don't go running to Road and Track and tell them they got it wrong. These are my stories. They printed theirs, okay? So this is Professor Porsche and my father. This was one of those morning meetings that they had every day. And this lovely lady is Sheila. So the other thing that happened when Dad called to tell me he was going to go work for Porsche, that was in October. He called me on New Year's Day, and he said, "What did you do yesterday?" I said, "Well, Dad, we watched some football, watched the ball drop, it was New Year's Eve, what did you do?" He said, "I got married." I said, "Great, to who?" I hadn't met Sheila yet, but I did meet her soon afterwards. So Dad and Sheila went to Stuttgart to start this Porsche journey together. Now, every month, Dad had a meeting with his management staff at Porsche. And Dad did something very different from a prior president. When he got there, they introduced him to a man named Herr Lusch. Herr Lusch, this is, you're going to be Peter's driver, and here's your Audi sedan that will be your car. And my dad kind of snickered, and he said, "Wait a minute. Mr. Lusch is a very nice man, and I will keep him very busy. However, I will be driving a Porsche, and I will be driving myself, and my wife Sheila will also be driving a Porsche." That made them very nervous, but that's what happened. So Sheila had ideas, and rather bold ideas. So Dad would come into one of these meetings and he would say, "Good morning, everyone. Sheila has a request." And they'll go, "Oh my God, what does she want now?" Sheila would like there to be a mirror on the driver's side sun visor, so she can put her lipstick on when she's when she's the driver of the car. And they said, "Sir, we can't do that." Well, why not? Well, because if we had to do that, then we would have to make another car part. So right now we have the left visor that doesn't have a mirror and the right visor that does. And if we have to put one on that side, we have to make another part, and that gets expensive, and no, we can't do that. Dad said, "Do we build cars for Great Britain?" "Yeah." "And the driver is on what side of the car? And the passenger is on which side that has a mirror?" So in fact, they didn't need 4 parts anymore. They only needed 2 to put a visor on the driver's side with a mirror in it. So ladies, we can thank Sheila because now we have that driver's side mirror. She had another neat idea with that convertible. But she loved convertibles. So she came home after driving her convertible around, and she said, "This top is ridiculous." Those of you that know the old 911 convertibles, you had to pull these levers from each corner, and you couldn't do it from the driver's seat. You had to have either somebody else in the car or to unlatch. And then you had to get out of the car and fold the top very gently, and you had to push down that little glass, the little plastic window in the back, and you had to stomp it down because it just wouldn't fold right. And then once you got it all the way down, you had to put a cover on it with these very fragile snaps that broke all the time. Sheila said, "No. I want to be able to sit in the driver's seat, and I want to be able to hit one lever and push one button, and I want the top to go down and the cover to come over." How does my Boxster S work today? Right? So you can thank Sheila for the nice automated convertible top. So Sheila was actually very involved in what was going on. And there she is, whoops. Oh, there we go. And there she is with Wolfgang, Porsche, and Dad. They went to a lot of events together. Dad was very visible as the president. But what happened next, after we saved the 911, was really all due to this man. Anybody know who that is? I know Rick does. That is Bob Snodgrass. And he was the general manager for Brumos Porsche in Jacksonville, Florida, and an avid race car driver. So after Dad saved the 911, he went on a tour of the United States to all of the major dealerships. He started on the West Coast in February, after the famous drawing. And he went to Bossack Pollock, and then he made his way across the country, stopped at Stoddard at Cleveland, met Chuck, saw what was going on there, and ended up down at Brumos in Jacksonville. And this took us to about the middle of March. And Bob Snodgrass says, so, Peter, tell me, have you ever been to an automobile race? Dad said, yeah, actually, I used to take customers to the Indy 500 all the time. And Bob said, Peter, that is not an automobile race. I mean a road race with sports cars. Have you ever been to an endurance race? And Dad said, well, no, I guess I haven't. He said, fine, we're going. What happens in the middle of March, in the middle of Florida? There you go. So off they go to the 12 hours of Sebring that runs on Saturday from about 10 in the morning till 10 at night. The next day, I get a phone call. Dad said, Laura, you wouldn't believe it. These cars, we started in the morning and they ran all day. And they did pit stops and they did driver changes. And sometimes not just refueling, but they had to change the brake pads and they had to do other work on the cars. And then another driver would get in and they'd keep on driving and driving, and then it got dark. And as it got toward nighttime, they would come around that final turn and there would be flames shooting out the back and the rotors are glowing bright red. Oh my gosh, no one told me this was part of the job. He was so excited. So he hightails it back to Germany. And when Dad got excited about something, watch out. So he gets back and he calls Dr. Bott and he says, okay, we're calling a meeting tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Everybody that knows anything about racing, I want you in the cafeteria. The next morning, he goes into the cafeteria. There's about 40 or 50 people and the spokesperson. And so Dad gets up in front of them. Now, he's like 2.5 months into the job now. Remember I told you about that Yankee that they're not so sure about? So he did speak fluent German, so at least he had that going for him. So he stands up in front of the group and he said, who can tell me what is the most important automobile race in the world? They roll their eyes, they snicker, like, who is this guy? He has to ask us that question. Everybody knows. Spokesperson says, well, Mr. Schutz, that would be the 24 Hours of Le Mans, and it takes place in the south of France in about 2 months. Dad said, great. Are we going? Yes, sir, we're going. Fantastic. What are we taking? Oh, we're going to take a couple production 924s and put a roll bar and race seats and belts and, we're going to get it all, ready to go racing, and we're going to take 2 of them. Wonderful, he says. Are we going to win? Yeah, right. More snickers, more eyes roll up. Mr. Schutz, you just don't understand. We will likely finish, and we might even place in class, but no, we're not going to win. Dad paused, and then said something that has kind of been his mark in history. He says what we call Schutzisms. He said, as long as I am in charge here, we will always go to a race with the expressed objective of winning. Now, I'm going to adjourn this meeting, and I want you to go put your heads together and come back here in 24 hours and give me a plan on how we're going to win that race in 62 days. Dismissed. Off they go. Next morning, Dad shows up in the same spot, and there's those same 40 to 50 people with friends. The room now has, like this, about 100 people in it. Well, where did all these people come from? They all work here? No. No. This guy, they're from Brembo, and they're from Bosch, and they're from all some of the other suppliers. The word of God now, right? So the spokesperson comes up to the front of the room, and Dad says, so, you got a plan? Well, yes, Mr. Schutz, we do. See, we have this car called a 936, and we won Le Mans about 6 years ago with it. It's over in the museum. We got 2 of them. So we're going to pull those out and dust them off. And then we got this engine over here that we built to go to Indianapolis, and we didn't do too well, and it runs on ethanol, but we know how to move that that gasoline. We know how to make all those changes. So we're gonna get that engine going. And then we got a transmission over here, we got a suspension over there, and we pull this all together. We think we've got enough time. We think we can win the race. And Dad said, great, get going. How many days do they have? 61. It's tomorrow. Off they go. So when Dad used to tell the story, what happened in the next 61 days was nothing short of magical. Not only the people assigned to work and build this race car were working on it, but everybody came over to the shop to help when they got off their shift. The janitors came over to clean parts and clean off all the surfaces. The people from the cafeteria brought food over for the workers. The other thing that happened was the next day, Dad got a phone call. Hello, Mr. Schutz, you don't know me. My name is Jackie X. I'm a retired Porsche race car driver, but I hear you're building a car that's going to win Le Mans, and I want to drive for you. Sign him up. Next phone call. Hello, Mr. Schutz, you don't know me yet. My name is Derek Bell. And I was about to retire from racing, but I hear you're building this really fantastic car, and I would like to drive for you. Next call. Hurley Haywood, Vern Schumann, Jochen Moss, all the great drivers that continued to drive for Porsche start calling. Crew chiefs, mechanics, everybody wanted to be part of this winning effort. So what did this look like? This is a picture of them working on the car in the shop. They ended up qualifying 1 and 2. Jules was the sponsor, car number 11 and 12. It's a picture of the car getting ready in the pits. But when they were doing this building, Dad and Mr. Bott were touring one day. Just walking through, as Dad did, to see what was going on. Mr. Bott said, Peter, you know, do you have any idea what all this is going to cost? And Dad looked at him and said, if we win, no one will ask. So you know the rest of the story. They did win. So here's a picture of Dad with Jackie X during the race in the pits. And this is one of my favorite pictures ever. This is Professor Porsche with Jackie and Derek after the victory circle back at the enclave where the Porsche family all gathered after Le Mans. So it was quite a miraculous win. The car ran flawlessly. The number 12 car had a little trouble, but also did finish. And people often say, hey, Lori, when your dad was at Porsche, did you get to do anything cool? Yeah, I did, right? So I got to sit in the car later on that summer with my brother, Michael, who was over visiting. And Dad and Sheila often would be able to drive the car in touring laps at vintage races and other things around Europe. So this was great. We won Le Mans. We saved the 911. What's next? They changed the rules, right? So the endurance racing world said, well, that's great, but we're starting with a clean slate. We've got to do everything different. We're not going to do it the same. So that next year, while they were resting on the laurels, by the way, this car, there's Derek. This was a couple of years ago, or just last year at Amelia Island. The car was featured at the banquet, and Jackie was our special marshal for the event. So that's Jackie driving the car on the lawn at Amelia Island. So I've got some of these pictures of a little bit of then and now. So we're bringing it full circle. But they did change all the rules. So, you know, what happens now? Well, we kept on racing. But how do we do that? So the new rules come out. I mean, all the engineers put their heads together. And what came out of that was a car called the 956. Completely different type of car, re-engineered. And they went back to Le Mans. And they didn't have a lot of time to build this car because the rules didn't come out until about 4 months before race day. But they went and they brought 3 cars this time. And they were numbered 1, 2, 3. And how did they finish? 1, 2, 3. So when Dad was interviewed after the end of that 1982 Le Mans race, they said, Mr. Schutz, how did you do it? We changed all the rules, we changed everything, you had to bring all new cars, and you still were able to come in and have a fantastic finish. And he said, another Schutzism, cars don't win races, people do. We had the same people, we had the same engineers, the same crew chiefs, the same drivers. And that's how we were able to do it again. So then they teamed up with Rothmans, which was the sponsor for a while. This is Derek Bell again. This is Helmet Bot, all with their Rothmans jackets on with Dad and Derek Bell. You'll see a few pictures of Derek Bell. He's one of my favorite people. And they went on to win every major 24-hour endurance race for the next 7 years while Dad was at Porsche. Now when I say they, it might not have been the factory team that won with the 956 or the US equivalent, which was called the 962. But it was a customer team. Porsche did something else extremely unique that has never been done before or since. They built a turnkey race car at this level of performance for customers to buy and go racing with, and they supported them as they did their own team. So back in that day, during the 80s, when you would go to Sebring or Daytona, you would not see just the 1, 2, 3 cars from the factory, but you would see 6 or 8 other teams campaigning 1 or 2 of these beautiful cars. And as long as one of them won, Dad was happy. It didn't always have to be his factory team. And that was something that was really special, that really spearheaded a lot of people's careers, because it gave that much more opportunity for that many more racers and that many more teams to be successful. So they went on to do other kinds of racing as well. Formula One racing with McLaren. So most of the time in Formula One, you may know that the engine manufacturer provides the engines to the team for free. And so they came to Porsche and they said, oh, you've got this new revised racing program. We want engines. Dad said, fine, we'll get you a quote. And they went, well, no, Mr. Schutz, you don't understand. You're going to give us those engines. He said, no. My people work way too hard. They're way too good. And their time is way too valuable for me to give that away. So if you want us to build a championship-winning car and help your team win that Formula One championship, we're happy to do it, but you're going to pay us for it. And they did. And Alain Prost and Niki Lauda won back-to-back championships with a car like that. The Rothmans car went in to win all across Europe and around the rest of the world. They went back to IndyCar racing. So this is at Laguna Seca. That's a much younger Lori. On the grid. They thought they could build the whole car, and they didn't really do that very well. They built a pretty good engine, but they ended up campaigning the IndyCar engine in the March chassis, which was the predominant chassis at the time. And they did pretty well campaigning in IndyCar in the mid-to late 80s. And these gentlemen helped them out. You might recognize Danny Sullivan, Al Sr., and A.J. Foyt. They all were drivers of the 962 and the 956 around the world, and then they also helped Porsche with that Indy car. I like race car drivers, so I had to throw this one in here. I think that many of you might know that I'm an avid DE instructor. I love being at racetracks, and I think there's just some aura about cars and racetracks and all the people that make it happen. So here's some of my favorite people. That's Mario Andretti and Paul Newman. Remember that year in 1985 when Danny Sullivan did the spin and win? Had he not done that, I wouldn't be in this picture because Mario would have been in the winner's circle and I wouldn't have been anywhere near it. So it's kind of okay. Anybody recognize this gentleman? Yes. Al Holbert was like a son to my father. He was a wonderful, incredible man and had a very terrible, horrible accident with a private aircraft. But this was during the year that I went to Le Mans and with my dad, and this was in the winner's circle. He was a little happy and I was a little tired, but it was a great result. He won with Hans Stuck and Derek Bell. Rick Mears was a big part of the program, also helping with the IndyCar, and Penske and that organization also had a big partnership with Porsche back in those days. Somebody you also might recognize, that's Hurley Haywood. Hurley has been an ambassador for Porsche for years. If you haven't seen or gotten a copy of his most recent book, it's incredible. And he's been a great ambassador for Porsche and also had a relationship with Brumos for a while. So speaking of that, we move on to after Dad left Porsche. He still stayed involved with the marque, did a lot of public speaking after we wrote the book. This is at Rennsport, and the reason I included that, unfortunately, my really good friends Paul and Marcy Thiem couldn't be here today with us, But they own this 962. And so we